Hello, everyone. I'm Maya May, and I'm here with Senior Lincoln Project Advisor Trygve Olson, and we are 78 days from the midterms, and this is the game we're in, so thank you for joining us today. As we dive into the Florida primaries, the GOP is being crushed under the weight of Florida resident, and I hope future felon Donald J. Trump. Ron DeSantis was just in Pennsylvania campaigning with Doug Mastriano, who is a combat veteran, Army colonel, but also a seditionist. It seems like he forgot what true patriots do. And Trygve, we saw you post a video on Twitter from when you were in Normandy.
Yeah, I tell you, Maya, that people are going to have to bear with me a little bit. I'm a little bit jet lagged at the moment, but I took a week off. My daughters, who are kind of middle school aged, had desperately wanted to go see Paris. And Dad had always wanted to go to Normandy, and I thought it was important to take him there. I'll tell you, if any of our viewers, if you have a chance, if you have the opportunity to go to Normandy, you should try and do that. It is an utterly moving experience, and I will tell you where it gets to for a guy like Doug Mastriano. He needs to go walk the beaches, Omaha Beach, like we did. He needs to go to Point du Hoc and see firsthand, where 250 Rangers landed and only 80 of them made it to up the cliffs that they climbed, and they held out for almost 2 days because they had to. If they didn't, their colleagues would die. And I'll tell you, I was moved to tears, Maya, which is why I ended up posting that video. I want to say thank you to everybody who watched it. I know we got game more in people who watched because they said so on Twitter, but I was moved to tears standing at the American Cemetery. You stand there, and on a monument that you stand and look at, and then you see all the crosses with the stars on them, or the crosses facing back towards America, of the 9,562 Americans who died at Normandy. It says, "To these we owe a higher reason, that the cause for which they died shall live." And if there's one thing about the game that we're in, and if there's one reason why we should all stand and fight together for it against people like Doug Mastriano, who's not honoring those people who served before him. I mean, he was in the military, as was, I think, DeSantis, right? I don't know if they've forgotten those lessons, but we owe it to them, who gave us all that's been bestowed upon us, to stand and fight every day, using the rules for dealing with autocrats, each and every one of them. And that means we all wake up. I mean, rule number 7 of dealing with autocrats is you wake up every day and you think about what can you bring to the fight? And for some, it may be big things. Liz Cheney's waking up every day now after her primary, and when she's thinking about the fight, she's thinking about 1/6 and what she does. Other people, it's go volunteer, whatever it is that you can do. That's what you got to wake up every day, just like those guys did. And they weren't asking themselves when they charged off those votes who each other voted for in the last election, or if they had a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Roosevelt. They were doing it for each other. America is at its very best when we're not asking ourselves those kinds of questions, but when we're standing together, standing up for those values of our founders. Same is true of the first responders running in on 9/11 to those buildings. Those are our best moments. And we have an opportunity, quite frankly, in the coming election and in the years after that, to live true to that higher reason that those boys at Normandy gave to us. I took a rock, keeping it on my desk until we're past this.
Right. And let's hope that we do get past this, because as you mentioned, this is an emergency on par with those days. And so it's really important that we all pitch in and all do what we can to contribute, because the job just got a little bit more difficult. I just want to sound the alarm. This is something that if I had my old siren, I'd be sounding it. A $1.6 billion donation, kind of donation, tax-free, to the Marble Freedom Trust. And their main goal is conservative dominance of the Supreme Court, voting rules, climate change policy, abortion rights. This sounds scary. Shit just got real, Trygve. Should we be scared? $1.6 billion to fund fascism?
Well, I mean, the $1.6 billion thing, the guy basically sold his company and gave it to far right causes. Should we be scared? I I think we need to think about, were those boys on the boat scared? Probably going in, but when the doors swung open, they were ready to fight, and they fought for each other, and they each brought what they could to the table. And we have to fight the same way. They want to make us afraid. I say this all the time, and the game we're in is built on a set of rules and sort of what I learned from around the world, fighting for democracy, watching people fight for democracy, helping empower them. There's the game we know, the democracy. There's going to be an election on November 8th, right? That's the game we know. And there's going to be primaries won or lost. But that's not the game we're in. The game we're in is a long-term battle for our democracy. And we should recognize that the other side's weapon is fear. That is what autocrats use. It doesn't matter if it's Vladimir Putin trying to say to Ukrainians, I will kill you if you don't submit to me. Or autocrats here basically saying, it's our way or we're not going to let you have free elections in the democracy that you have. Should we be scared? That's what they want us to be. We should be brave. That's what we need to be. And we need to stand up. There's going to be battles that we don't win. Mm-hmm. But we need to stand up, take responsibility, and fight. I'll tell you, the one other thing that was really moving for me, and I needed that trip there, given, everything that's going on here and what I do on a daily basis. I needed that trip. One of the things that I found most stunning is I saw the letter that Eisenhower had written, because they were unsure if it was going to succeed, where he took full responsibility, said, don't blame it on the boys. I take full responsibility. We need leaders to do that too. And that's part of the problem. Ron DeSantis looks in the mirror and sees the leader of the free world looking back at him in the mirror. And he probably knows what Trump did is illegal, but there's no leadership there. And there won't be a free world if we don't win this fight. And people like Ron DeSantis are the problem, not the answer.
And I was just about to ask you our theme for this week, but you've already given it to us, which is knowing that we have to have that faith over fear and coming together as a country. So I think it's time for us to just go into those murky waters, the swamp waters of these races, and let's talk about Florida. We have a Democratic primary for governor where there's a political insider, Charlie Crist, but he's also a former Republican, is leading Nikki Fried. Is this race pretty cut and dry? What are we looking at here?
Charlie's been just about everything that you can be. He's been a Democrat. He's been a Republican. He's been a governor. He's been a senator. He's been a member of Congress. He's run for everything. I don't know. He's
like probably he's
probably the head and president of the student body at the University of Florida or something at some point.
Possibly.
I think he's a guy who wants to be. Nikki Fried, Nikki Fried's the agriculture commissioner. I will tell you, Crist is ahead in the polls. And if somebody said, Trygve, you got to place a bet, and I'm by no means an expert on Florida politics, somebody said, you have to place a bet. Basically, all the polls, they would say slight advantage Crist. But Nikki Fried, I will tell you, DeSantis is going after Cubans who are coming to the United States. Huge Cuban population in Miami. He's basically saying, we're going to send them to Delaware. We're not going to let them stay in Florida anymore. And Nikki Fried is down working like Cafe Versailles. She's down working in Miami with the community, the Cuban community. I wouldn't underestimate that she won. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the advantage is towards Crist. In the general, both of them, it's going to be hard beating DeSantis because Florida is becoming more Republican. But DeSantis, we had polling that came out, 21% of Americans say that democracy is the most important issue for them right now. That's a big deal. And every day we wake up and we see all the bad stuff. You asked about should we be scared? See the bad stuff. You know what? We all have to remember the extremists, the autocratic extremists, whatever side they reside on. They are not the majority in this country. Right. The majority in this country resides in the middle. They just want to make it a binary choice for us. And so we need to recognize that's going to be going on in Florida, and it's possible. DeSantis could lose.
Right. And
Either.
what's interesting to me is what stands in between him and the governorship is quite possibly somebody who used to be a Republican. And he actually wrote a book when I was researching this. I hadn't heard of this book, 2014, The Party's Over, How the Extreme Right Hijacked the GOP and I Became a Democrat. So this was pre-Trump. He saw it coming. Do you think that's going to help him or hurt him in Florida?
I think it could help him. I mean, it could help him appeal to the center. I think, Charlie Crist is a well-known figure in Florida. He's been governor of Florida. It depends on, what Democrats do and what he could certainly appeal to people in the center if he's the ultimate nominee. The question is, will people on the left, not on the far left, be less energized around Charlie Crist? But, because he is a former Republican. But again, that gets to one of the rules. Rule 5 of dealing with autocrats is you stand and fight. If you're fighting against the worst forces in the history of humanity, you stand and fight with anybody who would fight on your side. Call it the Stalin rule, right? Like Churchill and Roosevelt, they were facing the worst human being in Hitler to ever cross the planet. They made allies with the second worst human being, Joseph Stalin, because you know what? You live to fight another day. I think we're seeing that around the country. I mean, we'll talk about Liz Cheney's race in a little bit. It was mostly Democrats who got out and voted for Liz Cheney. So,
yeah, and actually, I'm seeing good signs on Twitter, at least today. I saw a young Gen Z activist tweeting about it's better to have a candidate who is a former Republican who votes along with Democrats and who is a current Democrat now than a Democrat who often votes along with Republicans. So she didn't name any names, but I have a feeling she was talking about Crist and Manchin. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Ronald Reagan said a long time ago, he was a Democrat. And he would always say, I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me, became a Republican. That's how I feel. I mean, I still believe most of the same things that I believed when I was a Republican. I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me when it went full in on Trump. I still believe that America is greatest when we're standing in the world for the values with which we have always stood, So, but
I'm glad that you said all in.
That isn't the Republican Party of Doug Mastriano or Ron DeSantis.
Exactly, and Ron DeSantis.
Party.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. It's an angry party.
It is an angry party. And I feel like though Ron seemingly in a way tries to distance himself from Trump now, we need to remind him where he stood before. And so we have an ad, an older ad of DeSantis. I think it's really important for people to see it. So let's run that.
Everyone knows my husband, Ron DeSantis, is endorsed by President Trump, but he's also an amazing dad. Ron loves playing with the kids.
Build the wall.
He reads stories.
Then Mr. Trump said, "You're fired." I love that part.
He's teaching Madison to talk.
Make America great again.
People say Ron's all Trump, but he is so much more.
Big league. So good.
I just thought you should know.
Ron DeSantis for governor.
What a creep.
I was thinking ass hat. I wouldn't even give him that.
Creepy ass hat.
Creepy ass hat is about right. Honestly, like if somebody told you that was a Saturday Night Live ad, you might think that it is. And honestly, it says a lot about Ron DeSantis, the fact that he would so shamelessly use his wife
and his baby
and kids in an ad like that, and that somehow here he is, the guy who professes to be such a good, highly moral Christian, and he's relishing the idea that you fire people. I mean, I'm old enough now that I've been in positions where I've, had people working for me, and if you're at a point in most cases where somebody needs to be let go, it's a failure on your part. Either the organization can't afford them, or you haven't done a good enough job putting them in a position where they can succeed. The fact that Ron DeSantis just so cavalierly is suggesting that that's what they should teach kids and using his kids, and
well,
he's an asshat.
He's an asshat. Let's remember, he just recently, in a very fascisty way, got rid of, I think, was it one of his attorney generals or?
Yeah, it was some local guy.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, Ron DeSantis is just a guy who wants to be, and he's occupying this niche. I mean, this is why when people say to me, well, if Donald Trump is off the table, everything's fine, it will be good. It just shows them how naive they are. I mean, I run into people all the time here in DC who are part of that appeaser class who are just hoping that Trump goes away because they think, well, we can build this great coalition, and they'll be like, oh, I like DeSantis. I think he's great, because he's wedging Trump, but he's really one of us. He doesn't really believe this shit. These are the same people who are like, in 2016, Trump can't win. It's Washington, New York chatterers who live in this universe where, honestly, they don't understand squat about what people are really thinking. And much like Donald Trump, honestly, they just think they're rubes to take advantage of it. Honestly, it pisses me off as somebody who is like at my core still a guy who's from Wisconsin. The people they're taking advantage of are my buddies I go home and drink beer with, who are like all in on Trump and have paid $50 for a sign that the company, the three-quarters of the money is going straight into Trump's pocket. It's just, and that's what he is. It's pretty clear from that ad.
Yeah, and so it seems like they stand together. So final word though, in the general on this race, who wins? Chris? DeSantis?
Well, so this gets to how we rate the race. And this is important for people to recognize. If you're in Florida, you should do everything you can. Wake up every morning and think about full-time how you beat Ron DeSantis. If you're, regardless of whether it's Nikki Fried or Charlie Crist, we rate that race as 17. It's higher because, Ron DeSantis losing would be poetic justice for that asshat. And the world might be a better place if his presidential dreams were derailed in a primary. And certainly Trump doesn't like him. So like the more they fight with each other, the better off we are. That's destabilizing the vertical. DeSantis, ton of money. It's a hard year. The bigger deal is, DeSantis can get reelected and we can deal with him later when he runs for president. So Florida's governor's race, well, it's a big deal. It's not as big as we got to keep Doug Mastriano out. We have to keep Tudor Dixon out in Michigan. We got to keep Tim Michels out in Wisconsin because none of them are committed to honoring the election. Joe Biden won without winning Florida. The forces of democracy can win the presidency in 2024 without Florida. It would be easier if you had Florida, but Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, that can't happen. So if you're outside of Florida and you really dislike Ron DeSantis, spend 50% of your time on what 25 on whatever local races you got, 25 on trying to help out in Pennsylvania, and 50 on DeSantis or whatever.
I like the strategic breakdown for where to put both our time and our money because it is important. It is mission critical. Moving to the Senate race, though, we've got little Marco Rubio. He's running against Val Demings. Like, she's a powerhouse. She's a popular U.S. representative from Florida's 10th district. She's looking to move to the Senate. Before we talk about the race, let's actually, because maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with her, let's have a look at this strong Val Demings ad about Rubio.
Listen here, Marco Rubio. Val Demings here. For 27 years, I showed up every day to put dangerous criminals away, never knowing if I'd come home to my family. And when I was chief, we reduced violent crime by 40%. But Marco, you've got one of the worst attendance records in the Senate. When Florida needs you, you just don't show up. I'm Val Demings, and I approve this message because it's simple. You don't show up for work, you lose your job.
I love it. It's like Top Cop ad. Like, I feel like I'm watching like something from 20 on Jump Street. So I get amped up for Val Demings. But what are your thoughts on this?
I like that ad. That ad is the kind of ad when you're making ads, you see it and you're thinking that's a groin buster. It's a knee to the groin right there. It's a really good ad. I think it gets to the heart of, Marco Rubio. Here's the thing. He and Ron DeSantis are the same guy in the sense they both want to be president of the United States. They see a president looking back at him in the mirror. DeSantis, in theory, might be the Republican nominee. Marco's shot. I mean, what the guy's just like, and the thing about Marco is, he loves his, story about, his dad was at the bar so he could be in the front of the room, and, creates this whole thing about Castro, and he's the big anti-communist, anti-Ukraine, anti-Russian guy, all the rest of this stuff. He's on IRI's board, and yet he stifles in silence. He holds Trump's coat. He's the guy who, had his family stayed in Cuba, would have been serving Castro mojitos, for Christ's sakes, and bringing him cigars if he thought there was opportunity in it for himself. That's who he is. And the idea that he's on the board for the Republican Party's international group that works bipartisan is just, if John McCain were still around, like he'd be rolling over in his grave about that. But I think Val Demings, she's running a serious campaign. She's got a real background.
Yeah.
She's hitting him.
Yeah. And I mean, she seems like a good choice for Florida for representing she's law enforcement, her husband's law enforcement. So she has this strong track record. Do you have a feeling? I mean, it seems like Marco just sits in this seat and occupies it at this point. But do you see, is there much competition here?
Because Marco's a guy who probably deep down, he thinks he's entitled to be somebody important. Yeah, I mean, she's giving him a real race. And you know what? It isn't looking so hot for Republicans in the Senate. And I'll tell you what, even if she doesn't beat Marco Rubio, and I can say this from once having, worked with Republicans on Senate campaigns, they're going to be pissed when they have to spend money to bail Marco Rubio out. And the word around town in D.C. is Marco's already begging, oh my God, I'm under siege from her, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? It's pretty hard to take you don't do very well with addition by subtraction in elections. So if you're sitting there at the Republican Senatorial Committee, which they don't have any money because Rick Scott's wasted most of it on his running for president. But, you're sitting there at McConnell's super PAC and you're thinking, shit, we're going to have to spend money on Marco Rubio? Give me a fucking break. What the hell? We need to be spending money to try and elect. And that's the part that, you reap what you sow when you think you can have the coalition without the insanity, because that was their strategy. What I'm sure they're really happy about the fact we're going to have to spend it on Herschel Walker or J.D. Vance or a bunch of people who probably aren't going to vote for McConnell anyway for majority leader.
I don't even know if Herschel Walker knows who he is.
You make your bed, you sleep in it.
Oh, we're into the weeds with it. We'll hopefully get to come out of it. We do need to recap because it's important. Big news. We all saw it coming, but last week, Liz Cheney was defeated by Harriet Hagman, of all people, who, of course, she lied immediately about whether Cheney called her to concede. She just said she just said a couple words and then hung up and but with crazy eyes. But of course, Cheney has the receipts. But I want to look at what this means for other races going forward. Trygve, is there a broader national significance for Cheney's defeat?
You ever watch the show Billions, Maya?
I love the show Billions, Trygve. I didn't know you watched that.
In the first season, when Chuck Rhodes says the only thing more dangerous than someone with unlimited resources is someone with nothing left to lose. I'm going to open up Nagasaki on your ass. One of the best scenes I've ever seen on television. That's Liz Cheney. And actually, don't say Liz was defeated. She lost an election. But Liz Cheney is far from defeated. Liz Cheney is an essential piece to the pro-democracy movement in the United States, spanning Republicans of conscience, Democrats, moderates, independents. Yeah, She lost a race in Wyoming in a primary, but she's going to be around for the 1-6 committee. If you watched her speech,
wait, the 1-6 committee and the 1-2 punch. Sorry, I just needed to get that in there.
If you watched her speech, it was powerful. And for our viewers, Google Liz Cheney Reagan Library speech. It's literally Churchillian. It's so good. And I think the amazing part is that, it doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, whether you agree with their policy or not. You watch that speech, you're going to say, wow, this person gets it. So, yeah, Harriet Hagman gets to go to Congress. She'll be some backbencher. She's already got a house in D.C. She's a fraud. She wasn't backing Trump in 2016. But you know what? Liz Cheney can look her kids in the eye at the end of the day, no matter what happens in the United States of America, and say, I did everything I could. Harriet Hagman's going to end up looking her grandkids in the eye, and they're going to be like, why did you saddle us with this? If
I would think
speak to her. So, and who would want to speak to her? She's nuts anyway.
I was going to say, who's going to want to look Harriet Hagman directly in the eyes? Because every time I do, I feel like there's some weird sort of power coming.
You might turn to stone, Maya. Don't do it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
But I do want to point out, like, she won with 66% of the vote, 113,000 votes to Cheney's 49,000, roughly. What does that say about, given, especially because Cheney is like royalty, Republican royalty, what does that say about the stranglehold, the grip that Trump has on the Republican Party right now?
Says in states like Wyoming, in really red states, and Wyoming might be the most Republican state in the country, that Trump's the undisputed leader of the Republican Party. And Kevin McCarthy taking a victory lap on Liz, he's like one of Trump's prostitutes from back in the day. So there's that. He can take his victory lap. They're gonna. That's the thing. It's kind of funny watching guys like that. Seriously, like I've seen them all over the world. They're just weak people. Putin, the Putins, the Lukashenkos of the world. Kevin McCarthy's are a dime a dozen.
What's interesting, though, is it's obvious to you. It's obvious to me at this point because I have to pay attention. But it seems like to the average person, somehow I don't know if it's authority bias or what, but it's like, how do these Kevin McCarthys keep skating by?
Oh, I don't think he's skating by at all. Like Kevin McCarthy's too dumb to know that he's a dead man walking, right? Kevin McCarthy's so tone deaf about what he has no idea, like what the Republican Party's base is like. I could get going about a dinner party I used to get invited to that was just painful with a bunch of fancy people. Myself and somebody else called it the fancy people dinner, and McCarthy would always have some people there. And I think they were so tone deaf in 2010, 12, like they just, they're actors. They're just not very good at it. He's just not very good at it. But he can take his victory lap on Liz Cheney at it. I don't know.
And hopefully he just keeps running. I would just, not for office, but running away on that victory lap.
Liz Cheney's got more fortitude and conscience than in her pinky than Kevin McCarthy and Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio have in their entire beings. Funny part is, they're not even selling out for 30 pieces of silver. They might be lucky if they're getting 2.
Yeah, or just like a pat on the head. It seems like a lot of them just like a
seriously.
Good job. You're doing great.
Kinzinger, speaking of which, Kinzinger just took McCarthy apart. People should Google that too.
Google it, y'all. I'm going to do it. I do it right now.
Guys.
All right, moving on. Also want to recap the Alaska House race. Democrats, Peltola actually came out with 35% of the vote to Palin's 31% and Begitch's almost 27%. Again, this is ranked choice voting. How does that work again? Can you break down exactly what happened there? And are we going to get rid of Palin? Is she going away?
Yeah, so what's going to happen here is it's ranked choice. So now you got the 3 of them facing off. And what's going to happen here is I think it's going to end up being Palin versus Begich in the final deal. As I said before, allowing the mother of MAGA back onto the national scene She doesn't want to represent Alaska. I don't know what the hell she wants to be. I shudder to think that she would be anything ever again. I think, and actually her former in-laws, she got divorced from Todd. But
didn't they?
Her former in-laws hosted a fundraiser for baggage.
That's got to say a lot about what
they invited the national press.
That's so like the biggest diss. That's like the hugest diss. Like they're like, because they could have just not done anything at all, right? Like they could have just been like, we're just not going to touch this race, but to host a dinner, that's a classy diss.
Fundraiser for them, and they did it the night that they knew the national press would be in Alaska.
So they wanted to make noise about
She's
it too.
She's dating like a former hockey player from New York, Ron Duguay.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You learn something new every day.
She's big time.
So we've learned a lot this primary season, which is almost over. But we have talked about so many different races. And so just wrapping up today's show, is there one bellwether race or any races that we really need to be paying attention to going into the generals?
Well, as you know, we've scored all the races at the Lincoln Project. And that is where our focus is, based on those scores, about defending democracy. And, that's about how important are they to 2024, number one, how important are they to control the guardrails, House, Senate, local, and then how much extremism is there in the races. It's Pennsylvania, obviously. Doug Mastriano winning it might be the end of democracy. You can't have a governor of Pennsylvania who will not agree if his side loses the national election, loses in Pennsylvania, won't send electors from that party. Like, it's out the door. He needs to be defeated. So, that race. Wisconsin, Tim Michels, same thing. Now you get the bonus in both of those states that there's a pretty good chance if Josh Shapiro and Tony Evers win, that Ron Johnson and Oz go down. So you get Fetterman and Barnes in the United States Senate. And that probably means that you don't have Mitch McConnell as majority leader. So those two states. Michigan is the other one right now of those big three. Actually, there's big four. Michigan, Whitmer is running strong. I mean, she's run a great campaign. Tudor Dixon has come out. She did vampire porn. She apparently did softcore vampire porn. I don't even know what the hell that is. And then the last one would be Nevada. Arizona. Carrie Lake. You can win a presidential election without Arizona if you're a Democrat, but Carrie Lake is a whole different level of insane. And then you got the guy who's running for Secretary of State, who's basically like Nazi guy. So those four states, really, at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, and it just really seems like of those four states and those potential people who could be in office, they're all people who are like, F the federal government, we're going to do everything that we can to dismantle that. And that means denying election results, doing anything that they can. And that's scary. That's really scary. Like, we actually, we have an ad out. The Carrie Lake ad about, I don't know if you saw it yet, Trygve, but it's pretty... It's pretty powerful. I was like, yes, run that one everywhere. Everyone
even on vacation, they loop me in.
They loop you into. They're like, there will be. I'm like, you're on the beaches of Normandy. Sorry.
But honestly, the only reason I knew that by happenstance, Joe Trippi was also in Paris, so we got together for dinner, and it was awesome because he got to meet my family.
That's actually quite.
I'll tell you the best part, of being a part of this, and I used to wonder when I would work with Belarusians or Burmese or Venezuelans, all these people fighting for democracy, and they always were so happy warriors with each other. You know what? You feel good about yourself and those you work with when you have faith in each other, and I always would see that with them because there's the common cause, and we're not going to be afraid, and to take it full circle. Those boys on the boats living the longest day. They live just the most miserable day that any humans have lived, or some of the most miserable days that any humans lived. But you know what? They were a band of brothers. They came away from that. They they got through it, and they remember the ones who had fallen along the way, and we have to take from that. This, the races I mentioned, existential threats, but you know what? It's not over. Liz Cheney lost a battle. We all on Team Democracy, whether you agree with Liz Cheney on everything or nothing, we all lost a battle. But you know what? We didn't have to win that battle to win the war. We're going to keep fighting our asses off. Why? Because we got to take that sand.
Yes, absolutely have to take that stand. And I love what you said. I think you said happy warriors earlier. And I love that characterization of it, is that we are fighting for a common cause, which is our democracy, which provides the stability that we need to all thrive. And so we all have our part to do. Wrapping up the show again with a call to action. We do, there's a shortage of poll workers, as you probably have heard many times over in the media. Well, we're just reminding you as well, because good poll workers help ease the voting process. And we do need really, really good voter participation this year. So please, if you are interested in doing that, you can go to the EAC website, and there is a lookup tool that will give you all the information you need to be a poll worker. And then obviously also vote, but be vocal about voting and why you vote. I think it's a really good time to let your friends and family know in person, on social media, why you vote, why democracy is important to you. Because voter participation is one of the things that can get us out of this mess. So we do have to keep reminding ourselves of that. So that is all the time we have. Thank you, Trygve, for, you have something.
I do.
Yes.
I have one shameless plug.
Go.
First of all, follow my on stage on Twitter. Second, I hope you all follow me on Twitter. There's the 7 rules for dealing with autocrats. If you go to my page, it's the pinned tweet. I tweet about that all the time. Follow me. You can take those and apply them, but you can also take them to understand what's happening, and we will not be strangers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Those 7 rules are key for framing what's happening right now. And it's almost like a quick Cliff's Notes. I love it. I go back to it all the time. So definitely find that on Trygve's Twitter for sure. And then don't forget to watch the breakdown tomorrow, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And Wednesday, you can catch me and Lisa Senecal on We're Speaking. We have John Della Volpe on. He's like an expert on all things Gen Z. And a reminder, the Lincoln Project and our content is made possible by you. So if you find our show helpful, give us a like, a share, all of that. And if you're able to donate, every little bit helps. And the union is still going strong, right, Trygve? We still have, so you can
ask and taking names.
Yeah, kicking ass and taking names. So many volunteers. Yes, go to the jointheunion.us. Thank you, Sam, to help save our democracy. We can do this if we do this together. So let's do this together. We'll see you soon.